Yeah. Well, a little curious as to what was going on.
Yeah, just gonna.
Madam Chair.
Okay, are we good?
We are good.
Great. Phew. Wow, right on time. Okay, everybody, so I'm gonna call this meeting to order at 1 o'clock. So we will start with the review of agenda. And Shannon emailed he's out, but he could call in if we don't have a quorum. But I think we did. Yeah, so. Okay, so, any need for changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, we can move into minutes. Please review the minutes and let me know if you have any changes or additions. Okay. Seeing none, can we, I'm just forgetting, yeah, we're consensus approved. I was forgetting what meeting I was at. Do we do that here? Okay, great, perfect. Thank you, everybody.
As long as there are no edits that need to be made, the board can just accept the minutes as they are and get them finalized.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, then we are just moving right along to the on-site wastewater regulation with recommendations for adoption.
And Beth, I'm going to jump ahead of you for just a couple of minutes, and I'm going to combine board training with this agenda item.
Okay.
As the board has experienced here in the last few years through the annual assessment of the governance functions, we've talked about those 6 functions that the board really focuses on as you do your business throughout the year. And so I have plugged in those governance functions as training topics throughout, so that we're focusing on those board functions throughout the year and not just talking about them once a year like we've done in the past. And so today it's just timely that we get to talk about policy and what the board's role is in policy development, which is one of the 6 functions of the board. And so essentially board development, the role that you play in that is that you lead and contribute to the development of policies that protect, promote, and improve public health while ensuring that the agency and its components remain consistent with the laws and rules to which it is subject. And we will be talking about all of that today as Beth presents the on-site wastewater regulations. You all in the last meeting opened up a public hearing window so that public comment could come in on the regulations that are posted and the edits that Beth is proposing in those regulations. She's going to do a summary of what those edits are and what public comment has come in about that. And how I wanted to tie that back to the function is that it is then up to you as the Board of Health to accept those amendments based on the public comment that came in. And then the action for you all today is to recommend for approval the changes to the governance committee. And so in the last legislative session, there was a change to the law and what the Board of Health is able to do when it comes to regulations, local regulations. And so the Board of Health has the authority to make a recommendation to adopt those regulations back to the governance committee. The governance committee or the governance body is made up of 2 county commissioners, 2 city commissioners, and the mayor of East Helena. And so that would be the follow-on step to the action that you will take today. What you'll also hear Beth say in her summary is that our on-site wastewater regulations are not standalone. They come alongside and align with the rules and regulations that are set in Montana code and then administrative rule through Department of Environmental Quality. So we have our regulations that are specific to our county because we have very specific needs in our county that are different from our neighboring counties. So we have regulations in place to address those specific needs here. But they are aligned with and do not contradict the laws and rules that are set at the state level. And so that's how all of that works together. We have the laws that are set by the legislature, the state departments, they set the rules. We comply with those at the local level, but we can have regulations that help us to do the work that needs to be done here at the local level. We've had on-site wastewater regulations in place since early
January 1st, 1973.
Ah, there we go, for a long time, for a long time. And they come up for review on a very periodic basis. We try to review the regulations that we have in place in Lewis and Clark County every 3 years. And so we're about there. The last time they were reviewed was 2000. So we're a little beyond that 3 years, but 3 years is about best practice to make sure that our regulations are staying current. So with that introduction and a little bit of board training, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Beth to get into those on-site wastewater regulations and the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty, right? The dirt.
Yeah, not too much of this, but yes, I'm Madam Chair, members of the board, Beth Norbert, Lewis and Clark Public Health Department's Environmental Program Supervisor. I'm here today to, I don't have a lot to really go into with the changes, but of course, if anyone has specific questions or thoughts or comments or anything, I'm happy to answer those and also go over the public comment that we received over the last 30 days. So like Brenda had mentioned, we've had on-site wastewater regulations since 1973. Different iterations over the years based on how, like Brenda had also said, how the state changes their rules. We do have specific regulations when it comes to enforcement. So how do we enforce the regulations? Because there's no applicable comparable standard that the state has set for us for enforcement, as well as our certified installers. So each county is different in how they oversee their certified septic installers. So we have a program for that. And it may differ a little bit from another county and how they do it. Again, there's no comparable standard at the state level. So we have to come up with those rules ourselves. And that's generally the 2 main pieces that are not a state minimum that we have to follow is our enforcement and our certified installer program. So with that, we needed to review these. We were holding off a bit. We were waiting for the DEQ to come up with some new administrative rule changes to what we have to follow. That never happened. So we really needed to do a revision. And so we're going to move forward with that. And with that, it's the same summary I presented last month. We have a lot of typos and some grammatical errors and things like that we need to clean up, some formatting. So we went ahead and did that. And then there was a section in the administrative rule that we needed to also mirror closer to ours. That's section 2.1 on page 2 of our regulations. We needed to mirror that section 2.1 to match the administrative rule 1736-913 subsection 1, because that wording changed a little bit. So we needed to match that. Again, we can't be less stringent. We have to really follow what that administrative rule says. And then the one part, and this is a part actually where we have some flexibility, is within permitting and how we permit failed septic systems. There's no, again, comparable standard for how we address a failed septic system. The state just says that you can't have a failed septic system. So county, you figure out how you're going to handle it. we really wanted to allow a little more flexibility in how we allow existing component parts of a system to be kept if they're not failing. So the biggest thing we get is the tank is corroding. You know, septic tanks have a lot of gases produced in them. That concrete can break down and corrode, but the drain field's fine. You know, our rules before said we had to review the whole system for compliance with regulations. Typically, we had to bring the whole system up to compliance. And it was really hard in certain circumstances where we just felt like really that drain field, I don't think needs to be replaced. The tank does, but I think we can connect it to that existing drain field. And, you know, it's permitted through our office. It's, you know, it's still the right size for the house or the use if it's a commercial facility. And so we wanted to allow a little more flexibility, and we did go outside of Lewis and Clark County, talk to some of our bigger counties. They do it a similar way where you can, you know, trade out component parts in specific circumstances. So we wanted to kind of do the same thing. Also to allow people to maybe not be so scared to come talk to us. That's a really scary thing when stuff starts happening at your house and stuff starts backing up and they're going, I don't want to call those people, you know, they're going to tell me I have to spend $20,000 on something, or I don't know, but yeah, that might be the case. We want to open up that line of communication a little bit more and be, work with them and know that they can come talk to us instead of doing the weekend evening after the sun goes down work. So, which has happened. So that's section 2.8. That was probably subsection 7C. That was probably the biggest piece of our change. And then we had to make some changes within our variance process to section 3.4 because it referred redundantly over and over to the Environmental Services Division Administrator. That is no longer in our structure, our employee structure. What do you call it? The organizational chart. Thank you. We don't have a division administrator and we don't have that title. So we just changed it straight to administrator. And then we had some definitions that were no longer referenced in our regulations because they came from the circular DEQ4, which is our design standards. We already adopt the circular 4 by reference in our regs. We don't need to have redundancy with a bunch of definitions that that aren't referenced in our regs anywhere. And then of course, updated page numbers. And with that, so that is our summary of the changes we made. Briefly onto public comment. We received 2 public comments. One was just asking when the board meeting was going to be today. And I don't know if that public is here, but they were thinking about coming. It was a septic installer of ours. And then another was from another certified septic installer and really had some good questions about kind of what I was just talking about, emergencies. So there was a question wanting to make sure, do we have an expedited permit process for situations where a drain field or another part of the system is failing, or possibly a short-term solution? So that was the first part of the public comment. I did reply that day to him that section 3.3 subsection 5 does allow for a tank replacement to happen without a permit as long as they have verbal approval from the department. So if someone calls us and says, it's collapsed, we have a problem, they can't flush their toilets, we can authorize a tank replacement immediately without issuing a permit. But that they do have to get their septic permit request in by the end of the next business day. And that all other permitting requirements need to be met. So we do have that. Drain fields, we don't have a provision for drain fields. As long as we have a watertight tank, you know, if something needs to be pumped until that drain field gets replaced or fixed, we work with people through that. We also prioritize all of our failed systems. Everything gets dropped and it goes to the top of the list in terms of failed systems. So, and then this person also want to comment about what do we do to get the regulations changed to where you can have a mixing zone on someone else's property, not just on yours. It would open up a lot more possibilities for drain field locations. So that is something at the state level. I replied they really should go talk to their state legislator about that. That is not something we can have a local regulation on because of our restrictions with how we get to adopt regulations. There is a bill, I put in my comment to him that I thought it had died. It did not die. I think it's still alive. We don't actually have any issues with that. The bill is proposed right now would keep drain field mixing zones on your property, so you're not going to impact your neighbor's property and prohibit their ability to develop and their ability to have a septic system. Mixing zones are one of those things that are, yeah, they're at that state level and administrative rule, and we don't have a lot of ability to adopt our own regulations.
Can you,
Yeah, probably what a mixing zone is.
yeah, exactly, define it.
I was thinking that as I was talking, these
Yeah.
are terms that, yes, so a mixing zone, if you have a drain field in the ground, and it's really, I call it an imaginary line, but it's an area that comes off your drain field, so when sewage goes to the soil and it hits groundwater, it starts mixing. It starts mixing with groundwater. The sewage is now mixing. Now you have a direction of groundwater flow. So groundwater flow is moving and the sewage is moving with it and we're mixing. That's your zone. A standard mixing zone off of a drain field is 100 feet. So in 100 feet in the direction of groundwater flow, you have this protective area underground in groundwater where you don't want to say drill a well. You have to look at when we're permitting, is there another drain field just down grading of that mixing zone? And maybe there will now be a cumulative effect of nutrients to the water quality. So mixing zones are really important when we talk about development and when we're siting drain fields and where we're putting them, whether it's just a 1 lot something or a 100 lot subdivision. We want to make sure that those mixing zones aren't crossing well isolation zones. They're not crossing into surface water. They're not doing any, because it's this protective area. It's too, the levels of nutrients, bacteria, viruses are too high at that point. Dilution's a solution to pollution. We want good mixing and before we have a well over here uptaking that groundwater. So that's what a mixing zone is.
Okay.
And so his comment was, because at the subdivision level, when you subdivide property, you can't have a mixing zone cross onto a property outside of that subdivision because it impedes their ability to then
Right.
develop potentially. So you have to keep all those mixing zones within the subdivision. And he's saying, I would like mixing zones to stay on the property. No, sorry, he wants them to leave the proper, sorry, now I'm getting confused with myself. What did he say? Regulation where you can have a mixing zone on someone else's property. So right now in the subdivision world, you can't without an easement. You can go to that neighbor and say, can we have an easement to have that mixing zone on your property? And they could say yes or no. But right now in the subdivision world, you can't do that. And we don't have a local regulation though here that says that mixing zone can't leave the property. It can't. If you're, yeah.
So what if, are there these type of things that get grandfathered in before these rules became
Yes.
adopted
Yes.
that were pre-existing?
Yes, 1993 was the start of really the mixing zone thing. It goes with our non-degradation regulations. And so any system out there that was installed prior to 1993 doesn't have a mixing zone assigned to it. And so we have a little leeway in local septic permitting where we get to, maybe not have to worry about a mixing zone. It's usually with our new development is where we have to take that into consideration. Yeah. So, like I said, there is a bill at the legislature right now, I believe that's still going, they want actually mixing zones to stay on properties and not go on to neighboring properties to match up with the subdivision rules. And I don't know where that's at right now, but.
Complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, mixing zone 101.
Thank you.
Maybe someday I'll bring a picture and show you how that looks on a plat. So that was our only public comment we had. It was a good comment. And with that, what my ask for you today, like Brenda had said, is to recommend to the local governing body approval, make that recommendation to them of approval of the rewrite of the regulations. So.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yes, please.
what is your protocol for sending this information out to the people who are doing this kind of work?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner, what we did is we used all of our channels to publicly let people know that we did have an open comment period. The first thing was, of course, through all the website, our electronic means, right? Our website, our social media channels. We also took copies up to Augusta and Lincoln. We took a copy, there's a copy up at the commissioner's office, and then at the planning office up at the city county building. There's a copy at the Lewis and Clark Library and a copy at the East Helena Library. And then we emailed all of our installers and let them know, because it's really important for them out of just about everybody. They need to know when there's a change. Consultants, engineers, those folks that work with these regs as well. So anyone that was a stakeholder that we work with closely.
That's
We
good.
also take out a legal ad in the
Oh,
newspaper.
thank you. And the legal advertisement. Yes, I forgot about the legal ad. Yes.
Well, if I might, I think that's really good to be going out to the folks that are doing the work and letting them know ahead of time. I think that's a good
Mhm.
policy to follow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Because they're the ones that care that it impacts.
And they will, to follow up, any updated regs, they also receive a hard copy of the regulations to go in their truck.
Mhm.
And they also receive electronic version as well. So we will bind them and we send them out to them as well. So
Very
they
good.
have it. Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions or discussion from the board? All right, is there a motion?
But do you want a motion to approve?
We need to recommend the adoption to the governance council
Okay.
or governance body.
And do I run into a problem because I sit on both so that I can go ahead and vote on it?
You sure can.
All right.
You just get to participate twice as.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I would move to make the recommendation to the governance board to approve these changes.
Thank you.
And I second it.
Appreciate that. Any public comment? Hearing none. Any further board discussion or questions? Great. Okay, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Doesn't look like it. Okay. Sarah, there's no one online, it looks like. Is that true?
No public comment.
Great, thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Okay, moving forward, we're going to now speak, we're gonna hear from Rachel and Jacob about suicide prevention and safer communities.
Rachel, did you want the podium or are you good?
I think I can put my material here and be fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm Rachel Jeffries. I'm the Suicide Prevention Coordinator here at Lewis and Clark Public Health, and here to give a brief program update. Next slide, please. So I pulled this data from the most recent community health assessment, and I'll just briefly walk you through suicide losses in our county and the state. So you'll notice that there are three, if you look on the left-hand side, you'll notice that there are three different colors. That reddish color is the national suicide rate. The dark color is Montana as a whole, and the light blue is our county. And you'll notice that unfortunately, Montana is about double the national rate. When you review my notes here, but the national rate is about 14.2 per 100,000. So that's adjusted by age. And then Montana, unfortunately, is double that at a bit over 28. And Lewis and Clark is is pretty much on par with Montana's rates. Thinking about some of the reasons why we have high veteran population, age is a risk factor both in veterans, middle-aged men, so once they hit 50 are at higher risk. Unfortunately, those who are Indigenous and live on reservations are more impacted. So with women, as they reach their 60s, that risk stabilizes, it does not increase, but unfortunately that's not the case for middle-aged men. It does tend to increase significantly as they age. That bottom center breaks it down by ages through the county, and you can see that once we hit about age 25, it's roughly broken down into thirds across those categories. So 25 to 44, 45 to 64, and 65 plus. And these stats come from the CDC, and then much of this was broken down by my counterpart at DPHHS. Next slide, please. The bulk of my activities is funded by the Mental Health Awareness Training Grant, which is funded through SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Every model that we provide for the grant has to be evidence-based or evidence-informed. Where we hit our third year beginning October 1st. The goal is to just introduce better awareness, better literacy, excuse me, and dispel myths about suicide and mental health. Something significant about my position is that we help to get with the Lethal Means campaign, which Jacob has taken over. And then we do have an active post-vention service. Next slide, please. So the goal was to create a comprehensive approach. And this model here was adopted by Dr. Frank Campbell. So it covers prevention, intervention, post-intervention, and post-vention services. And so in my position, through prevention, we provide awareness events, education, that could be through training models, it could be through more informal discussions, working to increase the community's capacity to provide these trainings. So I've been able to fund train the trainers for different organizations so they can train their employees and just get people in the community more and more aware. As it's intervention, we do have one model that we can offer to primary care providers. We also try to get mental health professionals on board with the various models, first responders, and then as we get more and more people involved, we just try to keep anyone from slipping through the cracks, excuse me. And then post-vention specifically, we have the loss team, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Next slide, please. And then here are the training models that we offer. QPR, which is question, persuade, and refer, is the most popular, and that's where a large bulk of our trainings come from. The nice thing about it is that it's 90 minutes long. It gets people comfortable with the topic. It gets people active. And it's a really nice introduction to suicide prevention training. So I'm a facilitator myself and highly recommend it. The GARD is our main purveyor of assist training, but it's really excellent. We provide some of the training materials, highly recommend. Mental health first aid and youth mental health first aid are unique because they expand beyond just suicide prevention. It does cover mental health topics and substance use, signs of those, how to talk about it, and how to have conversations. Signs of suicide is for school age, middle school and high school specifically. We partner with Elevate Montana to have early adverse early childhood ACEs, and then those protective. So the PACEs training, which I will be training that myself in April. And then suicide safe care is the model that we provide for primary care providers. Next slide, please. And then now I will move on to Lost Team, which is our post-vention service. Next slide, please. So LOST stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. It's composed of a group of volunteers, and there are two types. There is a clinician, and then there is a volunteer who has some lived experience, meaning someone close to them has died by suicide. And the goal of this group and the goal of the model is to provide hope to those who have recently experienced a loss to suicide. So it's really helpful to have someone who's a few steps farther ahead, let them know that it is possible to move forward in life and that there are resources, and it helps combat hopelessness, which is a risk factor for suicide. Next slide. We have specific services. So there is one in-person visit that is open to survivors if they choose to participate. And then after that, there are regular contacts. So at a week, at a month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then a year, and then they graduate from our caseload. And so all these touch points are opportunities to check in, to reach out, and to get connected to services if those were needed. And with the founder of the model, Dr. Frank Campbell, so this came out of Baton Rouge at a crisis center. When he collected data, he found that it took suicide survivors around 4 years to even begin to look for help and be able to lend any kind of services. And so when he developed this model and implemented it, he found that that was reduced on average to about 39 days. Which is important because those who have lost someone to suicide are at increased risk of suicide themselves, about 3 times the risk compared to the average population. Next slide. So we have a little over 20 active members currently, although we are recruiting for more, and we provide ongoing training. There are opportunities to stay up to date with evidence-based grief and bereavement resources. There are growing interests in other communities. So I've given a number of presentations to people outside the county who are interested in possibly adopting this model. Next slide, please. And I just want to end that we recently went to the Tamarack Grief Institute, which is really wonderful, and we received training from experts in bereavement and grief on how to better support our suicide survivors and loved ones here in the county. So with that, I will say thank you. And any questions?
So I do have a question because we've just had 2 suicides by gun here in the last 3 weeks. What is behind all this in Montana?
There's no single risk factor. It's complex. If you ever get a chance to listen to Carl Rostin from DPHHS, he gives an excellent presentation, but I can share some of the things that have been shared with me. So for one thing, we live in the Rocky Mountain corridor, which in itself carries several risk factors. So living at elevation in itself is a risk factor. There's metabolic stress there. Having lower vitamin D levels because we live at elevation, because we have dark winters, that in itself is a risk factor. And then you get into cultural factors. So the wonderful thing, but also it's a double-edged sword, is that Montanans tend to be self-reliant, self-sufficient, less likely to reach out for help. And so lack of connection combined with increased depression that you tend to see in this Rocky Mountain corridor, these states, it all kind of melts together. And then there is access to means. So not a criticism of gun ownership at all, but the fact is there's a high rate of gun ownership, and having access to lethal means raises the risk factor, because then you unfortunately are more likely to be successful. And if we go back to how middle-aged men are at the highest risk. Women make more attempts, but with less violent means. Men are more likely to use firearms, which unfortunately means
They work.
they're successful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I might,
Mhm.
have you gotten people locally to do any of the Tamarack training? Or to any of their grief camps and whatnot?
So locally, there's some overlap with some of our clinicians on our team. They are also connected with the Awareness Network. And if you're not familiar with the Awareness Network, they offer reimbursement to clinicians for 2 sessions at $89 each. So for clinicians who take this reimbursement, they are able to offer 2 free grief counseling sessions. So in that way, we have been successful. But I would say we could probably reach out to more people locally to try to get Tamarack involved.
If I might say, they used to have camps particularly for young people.
Oh, I think Tamarack does. I don't know that they've had any locally lately, but I know that they do offer them in outlying areas like Missoula.
Mhm.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner.
Mhm.
Good questions.
Thank you.
Any more?
And I think Rachel set Jacob up beautifully with her comment about people meeting.
It's almost like she planned that.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your work.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Jacob Miles. I'm our Safer Communities Montana Coordinator, which is our program that focuses specifically on lethal means. So Sarah, next slide, if you would, please. So Safer Communities Montana has built itself up over several years. The biggest or the most lethal form of suicide is using a firearm. There is no question about that. So we have been working, you can see pictured here is Ed, who is the owner of Capital Sports. He has been one of the strongest advocates for this, working with us. He has been involved with us. We've also been working with some of the local pawn shops as well. Most of the places where you can buy firearms in the area, we are working with them or trying to work with them. They will have free gun locks that we give them that they can give to people when they purchase a new firearm. A big thing that we just finished pulling off with the help of Ed is Rocking Tree Farms, which is a veteran service member support organization just north of town. We were able to purchase them a large gun safe that they are holding at their establishment where veterans and service members can come and drop off their firearms if they feel like they are in a moment of crisis. And we're going to hope to expand more of those services into the area. But the really important part about it is working with veterans, the VA, people like Ed, who are firearm experts. We understand that a lot of people who are firearm owners, it's a very important and personal thing to them. So someone just showing up and talking to them about them, if they don't know what they're talking about, tends to have a lot of people kind of lose interest or not pay attention as much. So working with Ed, working with veterans, myself being a veteran, we have found a lot of success in being able to have these conversations with firearm owners. Next slide, Sarah. So yes, the 4 main keys of it, partnering with as many groups and organizations as we can to expand access to our prevention items. The awareness campaigns, we have been running TV ads, radio ads, the potty press at some of the locations downtown. We're just about to wrap up a couple of months of running an ad at the movie theater before the movie starts. We have a billboard up on Montana Avenue as well. So we have really branched out and expanded our awareness campaign as much as possible with the options available to us here. The biggest part is, of course, those prevention tools, gun locks, Deterra drug deactivation kits, where someone can take their prescription medications from home, deactivate them, and then just dispose of them in the trash without worry of them entering the water or anything like that down the road. We've also recently started handing out locking prescription pill bottles so people can keep their prescriptions that they're actively taking safe at home. And we just got some lock boxes that we can fit all of those items inside of one box to be able to give out to folks. So we're really excited about being able to share those items quickly and effectively with people in the community. As you can see there, more than 4,000 gun locks have been given out in just the last couple of years. And we've been conducting trainings about the importance of lethal means safety. I presented at a conference in Billings back in February. That was the Protector Summit. It was put on by the Veterans Action Network, I believe, and DPHHS and the Governor's Challenge. So it was a summit conference event for people who work in organizations supporting veterans. So I was able to present there and talk to them about it. And some folks were very interested in trying to start their own lethal means safety programs in other parts of the state as well. Next slide, Sarah. So yeah, that's the long, not even completely full list of the partners that we have been working with. As I mentioned, Capital Sports and some of the pawn shops, lots of different healthcare groups like Many Rivers, Lewis and Clark Public Health, of course, veterans organizations, and the Montana Army and Air National Guard. A pretty wide range of folks from all different focuses of life and, you know, different job lanes that are all working together because we all understand the importance of this. Next slide, Sarah. There is some of what I was talking about where they, like that middle picture is one of our gun locks and a pamphlet about firearm safety as it pertains to suicide that is available there at Dave's Pawn. He's got some of our public facing flyers there in that left picture as well that we give out to folks. And you can see that in his actual shop in the case, every single one of the firearms has a gun lock on it. So we are really, really trying to show how easy it is to get these gun locks to folks. All they have to do is say yes, because it doesn't cost them anything to get a free gun lock when they purchase a firearm. Next slide, please. So this is the why. As we were just talking about, and Rachel set me up for when someone commits suicide or dies by suicide, if a firearm was used, there's a 90% chance that they are going to die from that attempt, where every other form of suicide attempt only has a 5% lethality rate. Those are huge, huge differences in those numbers. Almost 70% of the suicide deaths in Montana are the result of a firearm. And as we were talking about, veterans, middle-aged white men, and Native Americans are three of the demographic groups with the highest rates. And those are three demographic groups that we have a lot of in Montana, which leads a lot to those higher rates that we were talking about earlier. And the other really important one, go back just a second, Sarah. About 50% of suicide attempts happen within 10 minutes of a person saying that they are going to try to take their life. So having prevention items like locking pill bottles or disposing of prescriptions or gun locks, if it can make it last, if it can delay them more than 10 minutes, the chances of them attempting suicide decrease rapidly. And if you take away the most lethal options, like a gun lock or a gun in a safe that a person can't access, if they are still going to attempt, they're going to have to resort to one of those less lethal options, which, as we see, greatly increases the likelihood of them being able to survive the attempt.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Have you ever drawn any parallels to doing all this work and all these pamphlets and all this education and the gun locks? Has it really dampened down suicide?
That's one of the hard parts. Is it's hard to know how many lives we've actually saved through this work, but I can say at a state level, we did see a 24% decrease in suicides in Montana over the last year. That was a new number that just came out from Carl Roston, who is the suicide prevention coordinator for the state of Montana. So what we're doing is working, obviously not as much as we would like it to, but we are starting to see progress.
Okay.
The last time I looked at our county data, over time, it goes up, it's up and down.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear that the state numbers are coming down.
Yeah.
Ours they fluctuate up and down over time. So.
Yeah, and the why of this that is really important to me is I had a friend who attempted suicide a few years back, and she attempted it by swallowing a large amount of pills that she had in her house. But the second she did that, she realized that that was not the actual thing that she wanted to have happen, and was able to call for help and survive. But if there had been a firearm in that house, then she would not still be alive today. So I have personally seen the importance of this, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity to do this work. Next slide, Sarah, if I could. So yes, I am the new coordinator. I started back in November. The locking prescription pill bottles and these new lock boxes are things that we have not provided or given out as prevention items in the past. So we're really excited about the opportunities for those. We're hoping to work with some of the pharmacies in the community to provide them with the locking prescription pill bottles so they can provide them for free to folks when they pick up their prescriptions. We are part of the Governor's Challenge effort, which is a statewide thing, although it's mostly us in Billings that are the big parts of it, but that's working with DPHHS and the VA in efforts specifically targeted at reducing suicide for veterans, service members, and their families. And the part down there towards the end is we created a toolkit last year that was how we started SCM here in Lewis and Clark County. And we are making that publicly available for other counties and organizations that may be interested in starting their own programs. As I mentioned earlier, some of the folks at that Protectors Summit were very interested in starting this in their own communities. So we're trying to make it as available as possible for folks to start their own lethal means safety groups, so we can continue to see the work that we're doing here that has been so good and, you know, great to see the amounts of things we've been able to give out to folks. We want to see that expanded across the state, as does DPHHS. So we've got a lot of things that have been moving over the last couple of months, and I'm happy that I basically have my legs under me now, but really excited about the things that we're going to keep doing in the future. Next slide. I think we might be at the end. So this is from the 23 legislative session, SB 423, which was sponsored by Senator Ken Bogner, who you see pictured there, who is the Republican senator from the Miles City area, where I grew up. We were able to get a bill passed. This is a firearm hold liability waiver. So this bill allows it for, if a friend comes to me and says that they're in a crisis and they want me to hold onto their firearms, I can do so. And then after the determined time, or whenever they feel that they're feeling better and they want their firearms back, I can give them their firearms back. And then in the event that those firearms are used in a suicide attempt by them or something else, I would not be held liable for being the one that returned the firearms to them. So this is really expanding the opportunities for individuals and businesses like Rocking Tree to hold on to firearms for other individuals, and decreasing the penalties that they could face for doing so. So we're really excited about expanding this opportunity for people to help each other out by holding on to someone else's firearms. Next slide. All right, and the other thing I will mention as we're wrapping up here is this current legislative session. Senator Ken Bogner has also been working on a bill that is going to provide funding for organizations and businesses that want to purchase or install firearm safes in their businesses to be able to expand that network of places someone could go with their firearms in a crisis. And there is a bill making its way through the Senate that is coming from Senator Mike Yakowicz, a Republican out of Billings, that would provide suicide funding prevention specifically targeted as veterans statewide, that DPHHS and the Montana Department of Veterans Affairs would give out as grant money to organizations and people doing similar work to this. So we're really excited about these two more options to expand funding and availability of lethal means safety in the state. But that is what I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Just a question, and forgive my ignorance. I know theoretically what a gun lock is, but can you explain how it actually works and how it works? Take 10 minutes.
So there's two main kinds of them. This is the one that we have the most of, although the VA does provide us with cable locks. These are just trigger locks. So I gotta open it up here. So it locks through the trigger well of the firearm. and these ones are coded. So if you are not the person who put that code in there and you don't know what the code is, there's no way you're going to be able to get this off of that firearm and make it able to fire. The cable locks operate in a similar fashion where you have the firearm charged back where the bolt action area is completely open, and you run the cable through it. So that prevents the bolt from being able to go all the way forward and the firing pin to be able to make contact with any ammunition. So both of those options make it incapable of firing.
We invested in this type of gun lock based on individuals who own firearms and don't like the cable locks because they could do potential damage to the firearm, but like these. So we switched from purchasing cable locks to purchasing these based on that feedback that we got from firearm owners who prefer
The only firearm that this doesn't work on would be lever action firearms, which I don't think are as common now as they were, 100+ years ago.
And are those free? Do you give them out?
Yeah,
And just,
I could use one.
yeah, absolutely.
if it is you who puts the code in, has it still proven to be a deterrent that you have to stop and put a code in? I assume that would not take you 10 minutes. But
Yeah, it's not going to take you 10 minutes. The other recommendations that we make are, not storing your ammunition in the same place as your firearms and, putting a lock on your ammunition as well. So if you've got, if you have this on the handgun that you keep in your nightstand, and then your ammunition is in your gun safe in the basement, and you've got to go all the way down there, you've got to go all these different places, you've got to unlock these different things. It may not buy you the full 10 minutes, but it can still be just enough of a deterrent to get you that couple of minutes you need to think about that decision before you make a choice that you can't.
I would think for, if you have kids, grandkids in the house.
Yeah, that's
That's.
the best
definitely what I
unintended
would-
consequence of this work is that we're making firearms, safer to be around, especially for children.
Mhm.
We're protecting medications. So, if kids get into mom and dad's medicine cabinet, they're going to be locked in these locking prescription pill bottles, which unless you have the code again, you're not going to be able to get open unless you're slamming it open or something, which is going to cause a lot of noise and hopefully attract attention. So it is not only preventing suicides, but it is also going to lead to a decrease in accidental death and injury as well, which is the best thing you can hope for.
thank you.
Do people use these codes? Do they give them to loved ones? Like when is that what you also encourage? Like if somebody's going through they're having a bad mental health spell and they'll tell their partner or their friend, please make the code for me so I can't get into it.
Yeah, you can reset the codes on them as well. So, if you find yourself in that situation, you can, give it to your friend and say, hey, can you change the code for me and hold on to this for a little while? So that way, when you give it back to me, you can tell me what it is. But if I get access to it before then, I wouldn't know how to get into it. And, if one person knows the code in the house, but if someone else is the person who's in a crisis, then that's going to make it much harder for them to get into it as well.
Michelle?
And there seems to be some interest, I'm hearing about these non-lethal self-defense items like the burner and whatnot. Have you thought any about some kind of a campaign to encourage people to leave the pistol in the safe and get a burner instead, so that that it's not there in the drawer?
Yeah, that isn't something that we've talked a lot about, but that's a great idea. We work with, as I mentioned, like lots of VA and veteran groups. Mike Hosfield from the VFW has been a big proponent of this work as well. And he has done a good job of, talking about it to, firearm owners who are more likely to be the ones to keep the firearm in their nightstand or things. So the hard part too is that everyone who owns a firearm is going to look at it differently. There are those that want to have it with them at all times. There are those who use it just occasionally for like trap shooting or something. So adjusting our conversations and how we talk about it is something that we're always trying to keep in mind. So that's a fantastic idea that I'll definitely. look
What's a
into.
burner? Let me ask them.
It's a pistol-like operation but it's and there's several different iterations of it, but they shoot a non-lethal pellet of intense pepper spray and it'll incapacitate somebody or an intruder, or maybe some animal breaking into your house. It'll incapacitate them for 30 minutes or so.
Yeah.
I'd like to use that on that woodpecker that's putting holes in my house.
Yeah, any other questions? Would anybody else like a gun lock or two? I can run back to my office and grab a
I
couple
would.
for you.
Love
Great.
one.
I'll just give you this one then.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Got some weight to it.
Thanks, Jacob. Okay, so Jay, you're up for our air quality update, please.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the board, this was supposed to be presented last meeting, so if there's any data in here that you see that says through February 19th or something, I apologize. I tried to update it, but you should have a narrative report or a report in your packet. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of the detail on that, but I know some of you are new. So I just wanted to touch on what we do here at the Health Department, Environmental Division with our air quality program. We are contracted by DEQ to run an air quality program in what's called our Helena Air Pollution Control District. Now that area, which I'll show you a map here in a minute, basically runs from the North Hills to the South Hills, the Spokane Bench, and then the Scratch Gravels. So we do air quality enforcement outside of that area with issues related to administrative rules of Montana, so on and so forth. So if somebody's burning illegal garbage, we can do enforcement with that. But as you can see, there is our air pollution control district that Sarah read my mind and moved to that map. So it covers pretty much all the valley, out, like I said, to the Spokane Hills, and the county line. So Sarah, if you could go back to that second page. And just so you know, okay, so our main, is that the second page? Yes, okay, next page, please. Okay, our primary concern with what we do is wood smoke. Wood smoke that comes basically from a solid fuel burning device, wood stoves, fireplaces. We also, in our regulations, deal with incinerators, which are few and far between anymore. And then motor vehicle exhaust and road dust. And the main source of pollutant with wood smoke is what's called PM 2.5. PM standing for particulate matter. 2.5 would be 2.5 micrograms per meter cubed, which would be the size of a particle. Problem with PM 2.5, you probably have all heard that before, but it's a very small particle capable of getting into your lungs, which can get into the bloodstream, and it causes a lot of issues. And so also in your wood smoke, we have things such as carbon monoxide, organic gases, nitrogen oxide. So a lot of things we don't want to deal with. But next slide. Okay, so yeah, like I said, it's too small to be filtered by the nose and upper respiratory system, collects deep in the lungs, and then gets into your bloodstream. And at that point, it can't remain for a long time. And we see a lot of things with PM 2.5, such as besides the initial health effects, you see a lot of mental health issues, which they just talked about the suicide. You see a rise of suicide in areas where you have a heavy air pollution problem that can affect the mental health. So next slide. The biggest problem we have in our valley is it's shaped like a bowl. And you probably have seen me present on this before, but any areas in the mountainous west where you have a bowl-shaped valley, you tend to get inversions. And what happens with an inversion is, say, like today, or you might have a cold front come in, and that cold air settles down low. you know, obviously in the valley. Well, as it starts to warm up, a warm front comes in and it moves over top of that cold air. And if you don't have heavy winds or strong winds to clear that cold air out, that warm air will put a lid right on top of the cold. In fact, you can see it a lot of times. You'll see if you're coming from the North Hills, from Gray Falls, you can see kind of a line across the valley. That's means we're inverted. So that cold air gets trapped. Well, as it's trapped there, all that, the vehicle exhaust, the wood smoke, all that builds up. So over time, it tends to become a cumulative problem. Okay, next slide. So yeah, and we're very susceptible to it. Like I said, you know, it gets trapped in here. So what we put in the valley is what we breathe in. Okay, next slide. Now, as part of our contract with DEQ, we do the monitoring for the Helena Air Pollution Control District or the Valley. We have one station out at Rossiter School, which is showing right there. This is a little shed that has 4 or 5 different air monitors, filters in it. We are responsible here for changing those filters out on a weekly basis. We do quality assurance tests every week or every other week on those, in addition to what DEQ does. So they maintain the equipment, we change the filters and do the quality assurance. But so anytime you hear of what the current air quality is, it's coming from right there. And sites like Today's Air will give you an hourly update on what our air quality levels are at, and also our website, so on and so forth. So, next slide. So just a brief overview of the 2024-25 winter air quality season, which is what basically we're talking about right now. We run from October through March 1st is our air monitoring. This is also the time when DEQ controls outdoor prescribed burning, outdoor just, you know, burn piles, things like that. So because of the inversions, that's the time of the year that we focus on primarily. But as you can see, I went month by month here. We base our air quality on 3 stages: good, watch, and poor. Today we're in a good watch, but you can see we had a pretty good year. We really only had 2 poor days, and this was when we were close to exceeding the national ambient air quality standards. So we always hope for a lot of wind in the winter, which is not enjoyable, but it does flush the valley out. So we had, I believe, looks like 11 watch days. And when we have a watch day, that's when we are getting close to exceeding the standards. So we take a kind of we look at the forecast for the week, for the next day, and what's the wind going to do? Are we going to have good dispersion? And we can tell if we're going to get an inversion, we'll start moving towards a watch. And what we do with a watch is we recommend to people that burn with wood stoves or fireplaces, if you have an alternative heat source, such as electric or gas, you know, use that, or start using burn clean, burn hot, because we know that that's all going to build up. And then when we go to a pour, which we only had 2 days this year, which actually were only probably about periods of about 5 hours, where we're actually going to pour. We basically restrict burning unless you have an EPA certified stove, which burns very clean. So.
And are you talking a wood stove, EPA?
Yeah.
Wood stove?
Yeah, or a pellet stove.
I was just gonna ask you if there is such a thing, and if
Mhm.
there's
Yep.
requirements.
Yeah, in fact,
The
all
valley.
wood stoves made today that are manufactured are EPA certified. They have to meet certain standards. So the only place you'd find a non-certified stove would be, say, if you're buying something off Craigslist or something where, which is probably our biggest issue. Somebody buys an old barrel stove, wants to put it in their shop,
Mhm,
they don't burn clean.
mhm.
And usually they'll fire that thing up, heat up a shop or a garage, go away for a day and let it smolder down. So you get a lot of smoke
Mhm.
coming out. So,
How do they make them burn clean? Like what? makes
well,
them burn?
they have, that's a good question. It's kind of hard to explain, but the way that the stove is built, they actually will recirculate that smoke. They call it reburner,
Oh.
reburner.
Mhm.
So it actually reburns that smoke and they're
Mhm.
very efficient. It actually will produce more heat. So,
Interesting.
yeah, just in the way it comes out of the chimney, it's
Mhm.
different. So
Hmm.
the simple version, it reburns everything. So
Okay.
next slide. The last thing I would show you, just I do this every year, is just show from 2015 through present. Our good watch pour days each year. And you see the and I'm a little colorblind, so that the good color, I think, is that tan?
It's great. The green is good.
Green, sorry.
Yeah.
And then, of course, watch being blue, but we had a pretty good year. Like I said, we had from November, this is actually November through March 1st. We had 106 days, which were good. 10 watch days and 2 pour days. So, you know, if you jump back to, I believe it was 2017, we had, 22 pour days. And that, a lot of people remember that winter. It just was stagnant and things built up. We went for a week on end of it being in pour. So it was really, you'd go outside and it looked like soup. So
Everybody had a sore throat.
yeah, your throat and your eyes itch,
Mhm.
it's fun stuff. So last few years, we've been happy with our wind. So that's my report. Any questions?
No, but I think the mental health connection is super interesting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that is
I've
definitely
never
something.
heard that before.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Been a lot of study.
People feel like it's like, end of days or because it affects the chemistry.
Probably a little both. You can see the sunlight directly. Yeah, I know what, and we deal also throughout the summer with wildfire smoke. And now with a lot of the prescribed burning you see going on, which is becoming more and more common. In fact, we're working more and more with the Forest Service, DNRC, DPHHS and DQ on getting kind of the word out when they're doing these prescribed burns, because a lot of people don't know and they want to go out for a walk or a run or something and, the smoke's coming across the mountain. But they are something that, we all feel is necessary, to eliminate some of these fuels, but so it's become a year-round issue.
Mhm.
And, back in 2017, if you looked at those days, our air quality throughout the year was very comparable to Los Angeles County air quality. So, I mean, it really, you didn't get a break from it. And it's not as noticeable in the winter, but when you deal with that cold, then you finally get outside and you're like, so it definitely can have some mental health. And I believe in China and India, I've read several issues or reports of India where they have, and you have to remember from the Olympics in China and Beijing, that they would show the air quality, where their air quality index was over 200 to 300. The mental health issues were through the roof. And, in addition to other things there, but so that's
Interesting, thank you.
Higher asthma rates, of course.
Yeah, asthma.
Some of the typical
Yeah.
lung health issues that you have in areas where you have poor air quality.
Yeah, and we do see, like in 2017 and 2018, we've seen increased hospital visits for asthma, breathing problems, so on and so forth. So it definitely correlates.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Thanks for the presentation.
Mhm. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Hey, Jay didn't brag, but he is a smoke expert. Like they go to smoke school to learn how to read
Yeah,
the.
every 6 months we have to go to, we call it smoke school, but Eastern Technical Associates out of North Carolina, they have probably see it down at the fairgrounds, it's a mini smokestack. So you have to be certified. So say if we had a complaint of a neighbor burning, heavy smoke, we have to, legally to enforce that, for opacity, we have to be able to look at that smoke coming out of the chimney and read the opacity. And it has to be exceeding a certain level over so many minutes. So they test you, you stand there for potentially hours looking at different levels of smoke, black and white smoke. And you have to get everyone within 2 points of what, say if it's 25% or 50%. And so we did that yesterday, and Adam, Mays and myself, and Beth got out of it. But
Busy doing on-site wastewater stuff, I'm sure.
that's right, yeah. So, and usually it's snowing. It's the worst day of the year. It snows and it's cold, and you just stand there and look at the smoke. So we did that yesterday and we both passed, and actually Jackie Pearson from the landfill also does it because they have to be certified out there, so.
Mhm.
But-
And that's they have to keep the dust down out at the landfill.
Yeah.
And so she has to be trained to make sure that if they have dust kick up, that they are staying within a certain
Yeah.
capacity of dust being kicked up, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of the people that come there, from like Billings, they have the refineries and they have, they're looking at, and the guys from the refineries know too. So Ash Grove does it. So they'll look at their stack and say, okay, we're burning a little heavy, or, whatever it may be. So. Other than that,
Wow. Very informative. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Measles preparedness.
All right, Madam Chair and members of the board, not that I disagree that measles is a consideration for a safe and healthy environment. It's actually miscategorized. It should have been part of health across the lifespan, which is up a notch. So I just got it put in the wrong spot on our, still getting used to our new agenda template. So,
Me too.
yeah, measles. Montana, I'll start by saying that Montana does not have a case, thankfully, and we hope that it stays that way, but it is closing in. So cases are increasing across the country. At this point, the majority of cases are happening down where the outbreaks are, which are in the eastern part of Texas and the western part of New Mexico. They have hundreds of cases happening in small areas and communities. The other cases in the country are kind of sprinkled. We're not seeing huge outbreaks in some of these other communities. However, Alberta and Washington are probably the closest to Montana. So we're really saying it's not if, but when we'll get a case in Montana. We haven't had a case of measles in Montana since the 90s. 1990, I think, was the last time we had a case of measles. And that's because we've had such great vaccine rates in the country. We eradicated measles in the United States for quite a while. And we're just now seeing a resurgence of it because of the lower vaccine rates that are happening. So we are preparing for a potential measles case in Montana, in Lewis and Clark County in particular. The things that we are doing to prepare are internally what our response will be, how our staff will build our capacity and do the work that they need to do to investigate a case, figure out where those close contacts, communicate with those that were in close contact with the measles case, and then also preparing our community. We have had many conversations with schools. We started with Helena School District as the largest district in our county. They have been communicating now with parents about just getting them as much information as they can. This is what measles is. This is what you're looking for regarding symptoms. Getting an understanding of what their vaccine rates are in the schools. So thankfully, the Helena School District has a pretty high vaccine rate, so we're really grateful for that. There are some pockets within the district that the school district is going to keep a very close eye on because those are really high risk for measles. And what we know about measles is a lot. It's not new. It's not something that's it's not like COVID was for us where we didn't know anything about it. We know plenty. Measles is not something that's new. We know how it works. We know how it spreads. We know how contagious it is. So just helping schools kind of get themselves organized to make sure that they're vaccine records are in order, start communicating with parents about what to expect if we were to get a measles case in the school. Have also communicated with East Helena. They're on spring break this week. We'll connect with them directly about plans and response in East Helena next week when they're back. And then also worked through Katrina Cheney, who is our county superintendent of schools. She's helping us make sure that all of our smaller rural schools are also at least informed and are prepared. Daycares, we're communicating with daycares and providing them with lots of resources and lots of fact sheets to hand to parents. Daycares are probably our most at risk, I'm going to say scary environments, because we have babies. We have babies in those childcare settings that aren't even eligible to get their first measles vaccination until they're 1. So birth to 1, our unvaccinated population in this community, most susceptible and get very, very, very sick at that age. There's a case in Texas, a child died unvaccinated. 95% of the measles cases in the Texas outbreak has been unvaccinated. And so trying to make sure that communication is going to childcare providers and parents, specifically because of that really high risk 0 to 1 year old, very high risk population. Then the next point at which a child gets their second MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine is at kindergarten. And so all of our school-aged children then should have the 2 doses of vaccine. There are exceptions to the rule. Excuse me. There are 2 exceptions to the rule for a requirement of vaccine in the schools, in the public schools. One is a medical exemption. There are some kiddos that cannot get it Dr. Bedell could probably speak to circumstances in which kiddos are not able to for medical purposes. And then there's a religious exemption as well. So that's the reason for the 97%. It's a requirement in schools. However, there are these exemptions. And so we do have kiddos, school-aged kiddos that are not vaccinated. So those kiddos we are concerned about and want to make sure that we find ways to protect them as well. Not so concerned about the older population. Assisted living, long-term care, like we were during COVID, that was a really high-risk population. For measles, it is not. Anybody over the born prior to 1957 was pretty exposed and may have been sick with measles and are considered to be immune. And so although they have underlying health conditions and issues to be concerned about, we don't want them to be exposed either. But that's not a population that we're putting a lot of emphasis on right now. We did, in your packet is some talking points for you all to have. I also emailed that press release that went out to all of our media partners. That has a lot of great information for you to have as talking points if you get questions from the public. And then Amber worked expeditiously to build a measles specific website that Sarah can show, and you can direct the public to this website. Right now, it's under our, excuse me, it's under our communicable disease section of our website, specific to measles. So these are FAQs essentially, the most asked questions, and then the answers to those questions so that the public can know what they need to know about measles. As far as our response to measles, this is what it will look like. We will be notified that there is a measles case through the medical provider who tested the patient. So I'm going to use Dr. Bedell since he's sitting across from me and it's easy to use you as an example. If he has a patient come in and it's a suspect measles based on the symptoms, like where they may have traveled to, they have a way of kind of screening to determine whether they think it might be measles. And he says, yep, this is a suspect measles. We're going to draw a lab. or do a swab. So you can either do a blood draw or you can do a swab to test for measles. I think at this point, we're just going to do both so that we don't have to wait around for a blood draw if we're not sure that the swab is giving us the right info or adequate information. So we're having our healthcare partners do both a swab and a blood draw. Then the instructions to that patient is to go home and isolate until you find out what the results of that was. Because if it is measles, you are highly contagious. Contagious window for measles is 5 days prior to any symptoms and 5 days after the onset of the rash. So a good 10 days that the person who tests positive is very, very contagious. Measles is contagious to the point where if somebody walked through this room 2 hours ago, you are considered to be exposed to measles right now. So very, very contagious, easily spread. And so providers will be saying, go home and stay home. Don't go to work. Don't go to school. Don't go to Walmart until we know what this is. So we're going to send the lab off. It's going to take a day, maybe two. We'll see how quickly our labs can turn these over. I think right now it'll turn over pretty quickly because we're going to want to know as fast as possible. But the more cases we get and the more the more pressure we put on our labs, the more delayed they're going to be in getting the information back to us. So the healthcare provider calls the health department and says, we have a suspect case, and it puts it on our radar. Our nurses then prepare to have to connect with that individual. We wait for the confirmatory lab to say, yes, this is measles, or no, it's not, it's something else. And so as soon as we get that confirmatory, we reach out to the individual. Hopefully they're feeling well enough to talk to us. Measles is an illness that really, it's severe. It's pretty harsh. It's not something that people are going to be walking around with. You know, when people get measles, they're sick. So we'll call that individual, do the investigation, which results in who all have you been in contact with during that contagious window. And once we get a sense of who all they were in contact with, which is going to be challenging, we'll be able to know who their family members are that are in direct contact and exposed. That's easy communication that we can have with their family members. We'll be able to know pretty well who their workmates are if they've been at work within that 10-day contagious window. School, we'll be able to figure that one out in partnership with schools. But if they've gone to Walmart, if they've gone to a sporting event, if they've gone to church, if they've gone to any other public space, we're not going to be able to do that contact tracing. What we're going to do is on the website, put a map up that says, if you were at Walmart on this day, from this time to this time, you have been exposed to measles, and here are your instructions. If you are vaccinated, here's what you do. If you are under vaccinated or unvaccinated, here's what you do. And it will just be like a public service announcement, and we'll have to just rely on people looking, and we can put information out through social media and through our mainstream media outlets to let people know that be checking the map to see if you're exposed. And I would say that the biggest, the people who need to be paying attention are those that are not vaccinated or under vaccinated. Those that are vaccinated can go about their daily activities and just watch for symptoms. If they have any symptoms at all after being exposed, that's when they need to go home, call their doctor, make arrangements to get tested. But for those that are not vaccinated or under vaccinated, they need to quarantine for 21 days from exposure. That's going to be a really tough message to send out to the bigger, broader public. We'll be focusing mostly on schools and childcare facilities and do the best that we can to get information out to the broader public. We have a letter drafted for employers. So if they have a staff person that's tested positive, we'll give them a letter to share with their staff and whomever else may have been in their business to the best of their ability. But that's about as good as it's gonna get as far as letting the general population know if they've been exposed or not. Our communication primarily will be through a text message to those individuals that we get a name and a number for. Otherwise, we're posting information to the website and letting the general population know, the general public know what's going on via the website. It's, when we get the first case, it's going to be frantic. And I think the more cases that we get, it will slow down. Information will be easier to disseminate. People will know where to go to get things answered. But we are anticipating that the first couple cases in Lewis and Clark County is going to create a lot of chaos. So we're doing our best to prepare for that chaos and get as much information out to people now. We're sending messages out to the public that says, if you don't know your vaccine status, you need to figure out what that is now. So call your primary care, see if you can get a hold of your medical records. We can look up vaccine records with permission in the state database for vaccine records, but it's an opt-in system. So if we didn't opt to have her vaccine record in MTREX, it's not going to be in there for us to look it up. People like me I don't have my childhood vaccination records, right? So the option for individuals who don't know or don't have proof of vaccine, there's a titer. It's a blood draw that will show if you're immune. So people who were sick with measles will show immunity, and people who have had their vaccine will show immunity. And that will be the proof or the confirmation that they have immunity. Otherwise, we're working with under vaccinated or unvaccinated. So
Question, I did the titer because I didn't know when I was in that weird window.
yeah.
So now I have an email and a lab result. Is there any thing like I have a WHO vaccination record.
Mhm.
Is it possible that we can get something on there that shows they can look at the titer results so that I don't have to go to the lab? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like to make it easier to prove that after the fact from the titer.
Yeah, I would recommend that you get your vaccine record put in MTREX.
So can I use that?
You could just bring your records into the health department and give us permission to put your record that you got into the MTREX, and it will show that your titer was done and you show immunity. Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, that's what otherwise you're on your own for managing your own record. So MTREX is the state of Montana's vaccine registry.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if titer result
It
was
is.
able to be
Yeah.
imported into that.
Yeah,
That's-
and it shows as a titer.
Mhm.
So it shows whether it's an actual vaccine or a titer that shows immunity.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I have a question.
Sure, yes, ma'am.
So there's different types of vaccines
Mhm.
for the MMR.
Yep.
There's the attenuated, there's live vaccine, there's killed vaccine.
Mhm.
What are they giving?
Yeah, it is not the killed vaccine that was given, and I'm going to pull my notes back up because I can't remember the dates now at the top of my head. In the 60s, there's a time frame in the 60s or
It was
70s
like 1963 to 1967 or something.
where
It wasn't, it was not effective.
it was
It was a
killed,
inactivated.
inactivated vaccine, and it was proven to not be effective. So anybody that received the vaccine in that time frame, it's recommended that they get a single dose. And
We're getting some of those people, like,
What are they giving now, though? What kind of?
the
vaccine is it?
attenuated. Mhm.
So that's partially broken apart,
Yeah, correct.
measles virus,
sure.
right? How does that work differently
What's the
than?
science behind it?
So my understanding is the live vaccine,
Mhm.
you could actually shed that
Mhm.
to other people. They could actually get, right? They could actually get measles from that. So they don't like to do that one. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't even know if that's
Yeah.
around
I
anymore.
wish I had Shelley down here because she would be able to answer all of the
And the
vaccine specific
attenuated
questions.
one, which is one you're talking about, right? That they're given, which is stripped down a little bit, particleized, is not 100% effective either because it's been altered.
Sarah, will you ping Shelley and see if she's available?
Would
And
you
see if she
agree?
might be able to run down for a minute?
We'll call her.
Okay, thanks.
So it's not 100% that you're going to be fully vaccinated like you
I
think
think
you are.
now it's 97%.
Yes, the current vaccine is 97% effective against the disease.
And they feel like that's the safest one
It is.
to give.
It's a very safe vaccine.
Yeah, except the adjuvants, do you know what's all in it? That's partly why some people don't get them, is because of the additives they add, like aluminum, and they used to add mercury and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, not anymore. Mm-mm. Not mercury.
No, but right,
Yeah.
thimerosal,
Yeah.
which I used to see that, my kids got some of that.
Yeah.
But they're just putting aluminum, I know. In a lot of them, that's keeping people from getting some of the vaccines, which for children is very, very toxic to their brains. So there's reasons for vaccine hesitancy. And there's like 1 in 300 that they can have brain damage from the MMR.
So that was in that
Really?
press
No,
release.
sounds really high.
Okay.
And it's,
That would
according
be-
to the data that we have and the press release that was sent.
I mean, it's
We
like,
did have, and maybe Sarah, I'm gonna bring it up, but will you bring it up as well? The press release,
Or something.
even with DT, so I don't know.
not the fact sheet, but the press release that we sent.
Yeah. Yeah, let me find it.
It has that really great chart on it that shows the
Statistics.
risk of, hey,
Brain damage.
I just love, I have this wizard behind the TV. Sherry's asking some really great questions about the vaccine specifically.
Okay.
And so I thought it would be helpful, as you are our expert in that. And then Sarah and I are working on getting the chart that we put in the press release that talks about the risk associated with getting the virus versus the risks associated with the vaccine and how safe the vaccine is. But there's some really great questions about things that, what's the vaccine made out of and what do they put in it? And I was hoping that maybe you can.
I don't know if I can answer all that, but yeah, I take the question. Usually I have to look it up because there's so many different vaccines. I have to look it up. But good try.
Yeah,
What's the question?
the MMR.
So you're wondering
Both what's in it, what's all in it.
all in it?
All in
Okay.
it, But
We'd
it's-
have to pull that up on
Mhm.
immunize.org or just, we can look at the package insert
Mhm.
for MMR vaccine. Cause all vaccines are different. So I always have to look it up on each one and see what's all in it. So we could do that if you want.
Mhm.
So there's different
tell me the
providers,
website
different
again?
manufacturers have different.
Yes.
things, you know.
MMR2 vaccine's been around for a long time and Merck as the manufacturer for that one. And then the package insert for each vaccine lists everything that's in it, contraindications, the studies of the vaccines and kind of what they're for, like, and who can have them and who can't. MMR vaccine is one that some people can't get it. They just can't. They medically can't get it because if they have certain immunocompromising conditions, they can't get it. If you're pregnant, you can't get it. So, so the recommendations for it will list all of that. And so like for when we give the vaccines, we screen for all those questions to make sure. And then some people might come in with different allergies and that should pull up what's in the vaccine because we don't want to assume that this is in this vaccine and not the other. So if they have allergies, we'll look up and make sure that it's safe for them.
While Shelley looks that up, our epidemiologist made sure to add this to the press release that went out so that people understood the risks associated with a measles infection versus the risks. There are risks, as we've talked about. There are risks associated with the getting the vaccine. And so this is the information that we are sharing with the public.
Yeah, there it is, 1 in 1,000
4 in 10,000.
brain swelling.
For it's a fever related seizure.
Measles infection.
That's an
Okay.
infection.
So with
Vaccines
the
over there.
vaccine, it says, yeah, I'd like to know who's doing those studies.
So this right here, oh, we don't have this up yet.
Go ahead.
Do you want me to share it?
Oh, we're not connected.
Oh,
Sarah's showing
okay.
this and.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I pulled up, so I was looking at two different things. One is the vaccine information sheet. That is the sheet that we give every patient that gets an MMR vaccine, any vaccine. We have to give them a specific vaccine information sheet to the patient. And it talks about MMR, the MMR vaccine, what measles, mumps, and rubella is, what are contraindications, what are some side effects and all that. It doesn't go, the vaccine information sheets that the patient gets doesn't get into all the details on what's in it. But it does talk about this many people out of this many people can have this side effect, et cetera. So that's a vaccine information sheet that we give each patient every time they come in for a vaccine, unless they refuse it. But so for the risks of the vaccine, it'll talk about the sore arm, the basic stuff that you get when you get a shot. And then potential more serious reactions could happen rarely, but these could be the seizures, but that's associated with a fever. So a good example of the vaccine, there's the MMR vaccine and there's varicella vaccine, which is chickenpox. And then there's a combo one. And the studies have shown that the MMRV vaccine, which is the combo one, kids can have increased seizures from fever than on their first dose than on their second dose. So in that instance, if they're getting that first dose, we usually separate them. We don't give the combo because even though it's there, they just have that increased chance of fevers and the seizures. So we'll give it to them on their dose before kindergarten, but typically we won't give them that combo on that first dose just because that increased chance of the seizures from a fever from that vaccine. So with people with serious immune system problems, the vaccine can cause an infection that may be life-threatening. So people with serious immune system problems would not get the MMR vaccine. If they came into our clinic and we did a screening and found out that they had immune issues, we would not give it to them because we go off standing orders. We would say you need to go see your doctor and talk to your doctor about that one. So so that's the vaccine information sheet that
And then what site do you use for the vaccine ingredients? And she can just write that down and look it up.
all you have to do is search MMR package insert. And that has all the information. Every vaccine comes with a package insert and it includes everything about the vaccine. Kind of what it'll tell you what the study showed the side effects were, like redness in the arm. This many people got redness in the arm. It'll show you the contraindications. It'll show you what's in it. So people allergic to what's in the vaccine can't get it. And so we would go and look at that if anybody had any allergies. And so sometimes the package insert, like say, this was approved for, and I talked about this a little bit last meeting, this is approved for anybody, right? But then we go off of, it's called ACIP recommendations. So what they do is they say, and a good example is pneumonia vaccine. Pneumonia vaccine is probably safe for anybody to get, but why does everybody need it? Because not everybody gets pneumonia disease, invasive pneumococcal disease, so which causes hospitalization and death. So what they do is ACIP looks at, it's these older people that are getting pneumococcal disease, invasive pneumococcal disease, and getting in the hospital with it and dying, and these younger ones. So really, it should only be recommended for these people or these people in between that have these risk factors. So even though a package insert might say anybody above 5 can get it, we go off more strict, I guess, recommendations that really give the vaccines to people who really need it, that would cause serious disease if they didn't get it. So.
And on the CDC site, you can link to all the studies that kind of inform that recommendation.
And who did the studies?
Yeah, it's all there, like
all there.
you can
Yeah.
pull up
Mhm.
the individual,
Yeah.
you can get as into the weeds as you
Yeah.
want on that stuff.
But the
And this
package,
as well, when so if you go back to the press release that we sent out, it's the links are there.
Okay.
So if you just click on that number 7 right there, it will take you right to where that came from, right where that information came from.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I have to excuse myself for school pickup, but just so you know, the Helena School District did send out a message on the 24th to all parents, which was great, and I was very grateful to receive it, so thank you.
Thank you. We're grateful for their partnership. Yeah. So there are a couple of other items on the agenda. So we can do some more follow-up if that wasn't enough.
I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do the follow-up.
and you can call me if you have questions, because usually I can help you find where to
Yeah.
find stuff, because we have to look it up. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's our
Yeah.
job.
That's our job. Thank you. Sure. Thank you for letting me just pull you right out of clinic upstairs.
That's fine.
Doing the important work that you're doing.
And then just so I'm clear, the talking points are for us, for employees, what, how do you?
Yeah,
imagine
those
them
are-
being used?
Those are for you to understand, and then if you have any questions from the public.
Great.
And I took all those talking points and that's what is populated on our website.
Nice. May I just make a little suggestion?
Go for it.
Maybe just like an overview of what is measles and what the symptoms are, just like a definition, and maybe even just like a historical story about like what happened, like, you know, like in this year that it was eradicated and this is the first case and in this many months, we've seen this much percentage increase. So we like get clear on the
Yeah.
problem and then we can like.
Our press release went more into that.
Yeah.
So this is more just an FAQ. Our press release was more of the history
Yeah.
behind it, but we can totally weave those together. on the
That might be
website.
great.
Yeah.
But I think it's really good. It's very thorough.
Let's link the press release to the
Yeah,
website too, so it's all together. Mhm.
Well, way to prepare. Thank you for doing that.
And if you're getting questions that the information that we're putting out isn't satisfying, let us know so that we can adjust and adapt and try to answer the questions that need to be answered. Yeah.
What percentage of the people are we estimating are immune?
That's a tough one because there's no really good data source that tells us of all of the residents in Lewis and Clark County who's vaccinated.
What about
School.
nationwide?
No, there's not a good data source. So it's hard to estimate. I mean, there's some stuff out there that try to estimate it using models. But we don't have a good data source because like we were talking about earlier, we don't have a central repository where all vaccine records are kept. So your vaccine record from when you were a child and the vaccines that you've received over the course of your lifetime are yours and in your medical record, and may only be in the state registry if you've allowed that. If you've said, yes, I would like my vaccine record to be included in the state registry. That's the only, so the state registry gives us some information about vaccine status, but it's not it's not thorough or comprehensive.
We have an estimate of what percentage of the children are?
No, so they do, the schools know because they can ask and there is a vaccine requirement and they have a requirement to collect vaccine records. And so Helena School District is sitting at about 97% vaccinated.
So
Great,
they got about
really great.
90%. So we've only got about 3% of the children in the community that
In the
are
Helena School District. So we have.
in the district, yeah.
Yeah, so
okay.
we have private schools in
And we
our
got
community
homeschoolers,
and we have homeschools in our community. East Helena, I haven't connected with them yet until next week when they're back from spring break,
So
but
it's just, that's District 1 then.
yeah, it's just Helena Public Schools.
Okay.
And they have a great, they have that 97% is a really good protection. And that level of protection will protect the 3% that cannot or have not got or don't have a vaccine on board. So.
Just as an aside, when I started school with my baby brother was born the same month I started kindergarten. And the folks always said I brought everything home and he got hit.
Mhm.
You got vaccinated.
And I remember the measles. I had a few little bumps. One didn't bother me, and he was covered. And it was he was miserable for weeks.
Yeah.
I think the problem that we're going to run into is the 21 days. I mean, if you
The
can kind of
quarantine.
put yourself in the position of a parent who is working just barely keeping their head above water, and all of a sudden they're saying they can't go to work for 3 weeks, and the car payment and the rent payment are due. It's going to be tough to get people and you know, they've got to be torn, you know?
Well, and all we can do is help them understand why that's important. And it comes down to their protection because they are the most susceptible to getting the illness because they are unvaccinated or undervaccinated, and the protection of the community. So if we can help them understand the importance of that, but you're absolutely right. It's a significant impact to that individual.
Are we positive that the 21 days is critical?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
That's the CDC recommendation.
I think that's where you're going to have the problem.
Well, we're not making up, we don't make stuff up
No, I know, I'm not saying that, I just think that's where the problem's gonna be is getting people to isolate for 21
Right,
days.
because they can get fired from their jobs.
We just lived through that with COVID. So we asked people to quarantine when they were exposed and didn't. And so we continued to see spread across the community. So will see the same thing happen if we don't get compliance with quarantine. It will continue to spread and people will die.
Yeah.
So all we can do is give
I
people the
just think
information
that's-
and they have to choose.
And then that's where it's gonna break down. I really do.
Yeah, it is a significant imposition on an individual. There is no argument there. To be out of work for 21 days is not an easy thing for anybody to do.
Yeah.
And if they are not supported by their employers, if they don't have the sick leave, or if they don't have the ability to do
Or
that,
maybe.
it is.
So they should be protected.
Maybe.
If they're being required by a government agency to quarantine, their job should be protected, in my opinion.
Yeah, and if we, I mean, I think that we could probably work through that in individual instances, work with employers around that if they're willing.
Yeah.
But
That's why
I
we're
don't
trying
know.
to get out ahead of this.
Yeah.
If we can get information to people, before crap hits the fan, then, I mean, even within 72 hours of exposure, people can get vaccinated and be more protected than otherwise.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that most people are vaccinated and it's not going to be a widespread issue. It's going to be pockets of impact
Mhm.
and it'll impact those that are not vaccinated. Which is
Okay,
really
I'm gonna
unfortunate.
move us along.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Mhm.
Okay, so our next order of business is the call for the Board Finance Committee.
Yeah, so it's that time of year. We are developing the budget as we speak for fiscal year 26. And in the month of April, we would like a couple of board members to sit with our finance coordinator and myself and go through the preliminary budget. That preliminary budget that we go through with the board finance committee will then be presented at the April board meeting as a preliminary. And then it will be finalized and presented for the May meeting for recommended for adoption of the budget. So I'm looking for volunteers, looking for anybody interested from the board to sit and go over in more detail than we will during the board meeting that preliminary budget.
I'll do that. I've done it for a couple of years.
Yeah, we'll feed you lunch.
Cool.
All those people are not here from,
I will reach out to board members that are not present and see if they would be willing. Mhm.
There's probably where I'll run into a problem to sit on it, because I'll be on reviews. so.
Yeah, you're part of the final decision on the budget, so it
I-
probably wouldn't behoove you to
Yeah,
sit.
I'd be happy to do it, but I don't think that'd be appropriate.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'll reach out to other board members, and if you're interested, let me know.
Okay, legislative update,
Yeah.
which I'm very eager to hear how it's going.
Yes, so the biggest news is that the licensed establishment fee update bill is finally posted. And
Okay.
there's a hearing on Monday, the 31st at 8 a.m.
And I believe Candace is planning on being up there to represent the county board.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that the county commission will have a voice and have testimony. Your resolution that you passed back in January has been given to the committee. So it's the House Business and Labor Committee that will be hearing the bill on Monday. In addition to your resolution and Commissioner Payne, who will be present for the testimony, there will be a Board of Health member out of Cascade County, a couple of business owners that are in support of the fee update, and a couple of health officers from different parts of the state. I think one from Missoula, one from Yellowstone County. And then our lobbyist and our executive director for Confluence, which is our statewide association. They'll all be there to present testimony in support. So that's happening on Monday.
And this is just for Lewis and Clark County, right? That
No,
there's
it'll-
the bill, or is it statewide?
It is a statewide bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if it's passed during the session, the fee updates will impact every business, every licensed establishment, operation in the state. So we're talking
I think
about
it's a good thing.
Restaurants and-
We're only getting like 17 and 18% of the cost of doing.
Oh, I know. It's ridiculous. And it's
Crazy.
low. It's
Yeah.
low
Yeah.
to
And it-
begin with.
Yeah, and not equitable. So a very small 3-employee coffee shop is paying the very same amount as Costco
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah,
So,
it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
yeah,
I think they can afford it.
yeah, so we work
Fee
to make
upgrade.
it equitable.
You did, well, how else,
Yes.
what else is going on?
Okay.
So, yeah. The Restaurant Association lobbyists will also be there in support, so that's excellent. Mako should be there and the league should be there. I think I already emailed this, but Medicaid did make it through, and is waiting for the governor's signature on Medicaid expansion. And so that was something that the board passed resolution in favor of back in January as well.
Great.
Still alive in the session that we're tracking are a couple of immunization bills that are problematic. So our public health statewide organization is working in conjunction with Montana Families for Vaccines to work with the bill sponsor to see if some amendments can be put, or if we just need to oppose. So they're working really hard on 1 or 2 vaccine bills that are still out there. One would essentially not require vaccines in schools at all. So that's a real concerning bill that has made it now across to the other chamber. And then another one that we've been watching very closely is a tobacco bill. The cigar bar bill has made it over transmittal from one chamber to the other chamber, which would allow cigar bar endorsements to restaurants and liquor stores. So you could then be exposed as a member of the public in that facility to cigar smoke. It would pull it out from underneath the Clean Indoor Air Act and the protections that we all have loved now for decades under the Clean Indoor Air Act. So that is
I
still
made my
alive.
stinky face.
I know.
I hate the way cigars smell.
I know it.
Yeah. So, and if people want to smoke cigars, that's great. That's their choice, but it's the public spaces that we continue to try to protect so that those of us that don't want to be exposed to cigarette smoke, we can still go into these public spaces and not have that exposure, not taking away people's rights at all, or even suggesting that people don't have the right to do that, but just in their own space rather than a public space. So that bill is still alive. They're working really hard. We have lots of partners across the state, lots of so the Montana Medical Association, the Montana Primary Care Association, public health associations, they're all working together to get some of these bills. Yeah. So we're hoping that they don't make it through. But those are,
Okay.
if anybody's interested in the exact bill number, I didn't prepare for exact bill numbers, but if you would like bill numbers, I can get our spreadsheet out that we've been tracking all session.
So that made it from one house to the other, the cigar
The
thing?
cigar bill, it sure did.
I can't.
Yeah, it's a sponsor from the Gallatin Park County, it's a Park County area. And the support is coming from, honestly, outsiders that come into the Yellowstone Club. They're the ones that are really pushing for a cigar bar endorsement that allows cigars to be smoked in environments that are right now covered by the Clean Indoor Air Act. So it's
That's really.
our Yellowstone
regressive.
Club crew
Mhm.
that come into the state of Montana that are impacting laws.
Imagine.
So I think our biggest celebration is Medicaid expansion for the session. And then there's been some good work around sanitation. You may be able to give a better update on what's happening with property taxes, but it's not something that public health has been tracking. I just know that that's a big thing.
Much up in the air.
Yeah, that's been a priority for this session is Medicaid expansion, property taxes, all of this other stuff is, they're just plugging away. And we're halfway through the session, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Interesting.
great.
Yeah, it's been-
Yeah, we get written updates from our lobbyists, so the next really nice summary that I get, I'll just send it out to the board so that you can have some more details in writing and bill numbers that I neglected to share.
Great. Okay, did we did we do our policy development training already?
Yes,
We-
we're
done with
snuck
that.
that into your
All right.
on-site wastewater
There's nothing
regulation.
else you need to loop us back in. Okay,
Nope.
great. So we're into our announcements phase here of Confluence in the conference.
And I actually have two announcements. I just didn't think to say it when you asked about the agenda at the beginning. I'll just choke.
That happens.
Please don't.
So exciting. Goodness gracious, I apologize. I need to learn how to swallow, I guess. It's just that I
Inhale the
choked on my
water.
water. The Confluence Conference is coming up and Sherry is attending as a board member.
Oh, you're going?
Really
Yeah,
exciting. Yeah.
Good.
I was hoping Shannon might consider, but it's still session.
Yeah.
His eyebrows deep in writing bills for the legislature, so. But our two new board members, as I was really hoping that one of the two of you would consider attending. And so it's brand new, Board of Health session during Confluence Conference, and it's here in Helena. So I was hoping that we would take advantage of it being here. The conference moves around the state. Last year it was in Missoula. Next year it'll probably be in Billings. So the fact that it's here this year, I wanted to capitalize on that. So, so I'm really excited, and well, maybe we can work to make room on an agenda, and you can maybe summarize some of the things if you
glad to
would be
do that.
willing for board members that aren't able to attend.
Yeah.
It could be part of your board training section of the agenda on one of the upcoming months. The other announcement is that the community health improvement planning process is wrapping up. The third culminating session occurred last week. And we have a really nice draft. And so that draft is going to be posted publicly, and we'll ask for public comment on it before we finalize it. When that gets public, it'll be next week when we put it out on the website with a form to fill out to provide us some feedback. I'll send it to board members so that you have an opportunity to review it, see it, provide some feedback on it before we finalize. At sometime at the end of April, first part of May, we'll get it designed. Right now, it's just in a Word document. It's just the content. It'll get designed really, really pretty and
With a map, with the map.
with a map. The Community Health Improvement Plan.
Oh, that one. Okay. I'm thinking of what's the one that they're designing right now? The growth.
Oh, yeah,
Growth
that's the
thing.
county plan, the growth plan. Mhm.
And that's,
Yeah.
when does that's still ongoing?
I
They're
think
still
so.
Gathering
I
data.
don't know what their timeline is, but they
Yeah,
are. Yeah.
I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, the community health improvement plan will have the three priority areas again this time around are behavioral health, chronic disease, and housing. So you'll see goals and strategies outlined of work that we want to do as a community over the next 3 years in those areas.
It looks like there's gonna be some legislation that might help you with the housing
It would be great.
thing is
Yeah.
coming up.
We're not the only community struggling, so
Yeah,
legislation would be helpful.
and they're gonna make the taxes easier for the owners of the property to make it, reduce the rent and stuff down for people so that they can, it's kind of a subsidy, but in a different form
Great.
to make it affordable.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been tracking some of.
Yeah, that's always been
Sounds great.
interesting to me.
Thank you. Okay, that was all of the announcements I have.
Okay, well, and I just, thinking forward, we're about to start my last quarter as a board member and chair, so that means my spot on the Water Quality Protection District Board will need to be refilled, so just start thinking about whether or not anybody's willing to take that spot, and then we're gonna need to fill that seat, so.
And the chair.
Exactly, so
Mhm.
just kind of start thinking about that.
Yeah, the,
Water quality district, I got moved over there because Andy was having conflicts. He was supposed to be, and so I'm gonna be on that
Yeah.
for the rest of the year, but they gave us a great tour out 10 Mile of all the things that they're changing out
Gosh,
there.
I was sad to miss that.
Oh, yeah.
Scheduling snafu.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
um,
2 board members, we will actually lose
You're
2
gone
board
too, right?
members this year. It'll be Dr. Bedell's position, which is a practicing physician in Lewis and Clark County, is the position he fills on the board. And then Bree is at the end of her 3-year terms, so 6 years. Both have spent 6 years on the board. And Bree holds the position of a consumer of health services.
Mhm.
So that's just about anybody can fill that.
Can it be an NP to fill Dr.?
It just says provider, practicing physician is what it says in the bylaws, practicing physician. Yeah. And so we'll get the information out to the public in lots of different ways of how to put an application in. And then it's the commission who chooses the next 2 board members. So as we grow closer to June, we'll have a celebration of the 2.
6 years. High five.
It's a long
We went
time.
through the pandemic together. Yeah. We served our-
You
we did our
you were in the
service.
middle of everything, weren't you?
We have been in the hot seat for a while.
Yeah.
You're out of here. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Bedell.
Thanks, everybody.
Good.
Great discussion today.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody
Oh,
asking questions.
Fascinating.
Public comment. real quick.
Oh, excuse me, public comment. Okay.
Don't
there's
think it-
No
nobody on.
public comment.
Thank you. We're adjourned.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
I didn't think it was, but
Yeah.
we had such an issue with Zoom to start that I'm hoping that didn't keep people from showing up.